a blade beneath her smile. Blind trust often begins with a gentle invitation. We were sitting at a quiet cafe by the bay on a soft April afternoon. Sophia wore a beige silk blouse, her hair pulled back, no makeup except for a hint of pale lipstick. She didn't stand out in the traditional sense, but there was something about her, the kind of beauty that deepens the longer you look. I was explaining my long-term vision for Echo, my integrated platform for small businesses, the project I had poured 3 years of my life into. Sophia listened intently, nodding at all the right moments, asking just the kind of questions that made me pause and rethink. Then, casually, after setting her espresso down, she looked up and said, "What do you think about opening a joint business account? It'll make it easier when we start seeking international investors." She said it softly, no pressure, no push. It felt more like an invitation to walk in the rain than a request for legal access. I nodded. But not just nodded, I took the initiative. The very next morning, I prepared the paperwork myself, went to the bank, and signed before Sophia even arrived. I remember joking with the bank clerk, "Guess I'm finally in love for real." There were no binding contracts, no lawyers, no advisors. It all flowed smoothly, like a still lake. And when trust is full, people rarely expect an undertow. I'd always been meticulous with money. At 18, I read every line of my first deal with Harris, every sentence, every comma, every footnote. I used to tell myself, if you're going to handle money, never let illusions handle you. But with Sophia, I was the one who broke my own rules. Not because I was careless, but because I believed. She didn't have to earn my trust. I wanted to offer it. And that's the danger of love when it masquerades as wisdom. It feels like maturity, but it often hides the same old vulnerability in a new coat. After we left the bank that day, Sophia gave my hand a small squeeze. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Everything between us felt right, natural, comfortable. A voice inside me whispered, "Isn't this what love is supposed to be? No secrets, no second thoughts." When you love someone enough, you dismantle every wall believing that's what grown-up love demands. But sometimes, what we call maturity is just a more refined version of surrender. I used to think only fools got betrayed. But betrayal doesn't prey on fools. It chooses the wise who craft beautiful stories just to avoid asking the hard questions. Sophia never lied to me. She just didn't say much. And I never asked. What we had was cemented by trust without conditions. And perhaps trust without conditions is the most dangerous condition of all. I didn't just trust her with logic. I trusted her with the tender parts of me, the parts that craved a love without caution. One day, while we waited for the elevator, I found myself whispering, "If something ever happens to the company, I wouldn't blame you. I was the one who chose to believe." Sophia turned, smiled gently, and in that smile, I now realize there was already a blade. Loving the right person makes all defenses disappear. I used to live by clear boundaries. In business, I never signed papers without reading the last line. In partnerships, I never shared an account without an independent agreement. And in relationships, I never let anyone touch the parts of me I wasn't ready to reveal. Those rules protected me through reckless youth, through ambition, through fleeting loves. Not because I feared betrayal, but because I understood human nature. I believed that only by holding firm to boundaries could I truly remain myself. Then came Sophia. She never asked about my limits. She never pushed to cross them. She simply existed present, intelligent, calm, and somehow made me believe that if anyone deserved to walk beside me without walls, it was her. I had never shared asset titles, never disclosed source code, never revealed financial accounts, never trusted anyone the way I trusted her. No one forced me to. I was the one who laid the armor down. When you love the right person, nothing feels like surrender. In fact, I didn't feel like I was giving anything up. I felt proud to trust her, proud to believe that between us, no fences were necessary. And that pride, I now see, was the first soft root of my blindness, because it made me feel evolved. I started doing things the old me never would. Sharing confidential roadmaps, giving her access to archives for convenience, sending technical memos without password locks. I even joked once, "You might be the only person I trust enough not to need a lawyer." She didn't laugh. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "Because you know how to choose right." I felt seen, safe, sure. Only later would I realize that sometimes the gentlest compliments are what push us deepest into denial. No one can pierce your softest places unless you first unlock the door. And I did. Not with a vow, not with a contract, but slowly, by softening every rule I once swore by. I can't remember the first time. Maybe when she borrowed my laptop to check an email. Maybe when she reviewed my Echo financials. Maybe when I sent her an updated build without encryption. One by one, the borders fell. And strangely, I felt more mature, as if this surrender was proof of my evolution. I once read a line from Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, "Let love be a moving sea between the shores of your souls." I loved that image. Love as a flowing tide between two selves, gentle, boundless, unpossessive. But I forgot. If one shore keeps retreating and the other keeps advancing, the tide will rise and drown them both. One evening, Sophia walked into my office around 9 p.m. while I was revising a new software demo. She brought a cup of tea, set it down silently, sat in the corner with her laptop, and started editing a financial report I just sent to an investor. She didn't ask. I didn't mind. In fact, I felt relieved. Because someone else was helping. Because someone else understood. Because someone else acted without needing permission. That night, for the first time, I added her name into our internal system as partner, not just in the project, in life. Confidence in love can disguise the loss of control. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who signs something without reading it carefully. But everything changes when you believe you're still the one in control. Sophia began bringing in her own attorney to help finalize the legal structure of Echo. Not behind my back, not in secret. She was open about it. "My lawyer will just handle the technical paperwork so you don't have to carry it all," she said. I nodded. It made sense. To be honest, I was exhausted. Pitch decks, financial revisions, daily investor calls. It felt like a relief to have someone step in and carry part of the weight. And I still thought I was the one steering the ship. I still spoke to investors, still signed strategy documents, still led the software team. I just let her manage the legal framework, just a little, so I could focus on the bigger picture. Smart people rarely fear being deceived because they believe they'll recognize it. But the truth is, loss of control doesn't arrive as a jolt. It comes quietly, through tiny, rational, even affectionate shifts. When Sophia asked me to sign off on a few equity adjustments, she explained it clearly, just to reflect real contributions. No changes in control, I promise. I skimmed through the documents. Honestly, skimmed. Maybe 2 minutes. I thought I understood, but I missed the appendix. A clause restructuring voting rights in case of future corporate reorganization. One small paragraph, written in that familiar legal tone I used to memorize. But that day, I ignored it. Because I trusted her. Because I trusted myself. Because I believed that between us, there was nothing left to question. She didn't deceive me. She simply moved at the exact moment I believed I knew it all. Ego mixed with affection, wrapped in blind faith. That was all it took to make me a confident fool. I can't recall how many documents I signed during those 3 months. I only remember that over time, Sophia began showing up to meetings as the legal lead. No one objected. She was articulate, educated, poised, and investors liked her. Victor is the brain. She's the framework, one French investor once said at a dinner. I laughed. I felt proud. I thought things were moving in the right direction. But I didn't see the layers of control peeling away, finger by finger, like a silk glove quietly slipping off my hand. One day, I stood in the office elevator after a 3-hour meeting. My head was spinning. I leaned back against the cold steel and closed my eyes. When I opened them, Sophia was in front of me, holding 2 cups of tea. She handed me one, smiled softly. No accusations. No signs of hidden motives. And that calmness was the sweetest trap. She didn't push. She simply let me believe. And in that belief, I crossed every line I once guarded so carefully. No one stole my leadership. I just stopped gripping it tightly, because I thought I no longer needed to. Even bright minds falter when emotion leads. I used to believe that as long as I stayed sharp, nothing could pull me down. I read constantly, analyzed fast, strategized well. In meetings, I could predict competitors' next 3 moves. To those who worked with me, I was known as the man always one step ahead. But here's the truth. When emotion enters the room, it puts a soft fog over every defense. Not enough to blind, just enough to blur. You still think you're in control because everything around you still moves, because no one raises alarms, and because the person beside you keeps smiling gently. I was still working, still leading, still raising funds successfully. Our demo product was getting praise. Some investors had started mentioning Series A valuations. I stood on conference stages next to Sophia, elegant, composed, introduced as my co-founder and operations lead. She spoke little, but with precision. Together, we looked like an unbreakable team. And instead of questioning it, I felt proud. No one stripped away my defenses. I was the one who declared, "This time is different. This time, I've found the perfect partner." And once your ego is comforted by a beautiful narrative, it shuts off the internal alarms. The more you believe, the more you go blind. I can't recall when Sophia started handling Echo's secondary source code. Maybe it began with reviewing for integration potential. Then came oversight of the QA team, then approving interface updates and performance enhancements, all under the banner of shared responsibility. It felt right. She was capable. I trusted her, and I told myself I needed to focus on bigger things. But over time, I lost track of the boundaries. I no longer knew what exactly I was in charge of. All I knew was things were moving, and I was being celebrated. The most dangerous thing isn't being stripped of power. It's when the one being stripped believes they're being empowered. I once lectured new hires on the importance of access control and version governance. Wrote in our company handbook, no single person should ever hold full control over any system, not even the founder. Yet I allowed Sophia full access to our auxiliary systems, thinking it would help her troubleshoot more efficiently. She didn't ask for control. I offered it. She didn't break in. I opened the door. She didn't lie. I simply didn't ask. And between not asking and not knowing, there's only the space of a single heartbeat. Silence in love can be the deepest self-betrayal. One evening, when it was just Sophia and me left in the office, I was about to bring up the accounting system. Specifically, I wanted clarity on the allocation of a new round of funding from a European investor we were in talks with. I needed to know where the money was going, whether the flow matched our forecasts, and why some items hadn't been verified by the finance department. As I turned around, I saw Sophia by the bookshelf near the window, flipping through an old tech journal, calm, unhurried, serene. Everything between us felt as quiet as ever. Before I could speak, she did. Don't you trust me? That was it. One simple question, softer than a whisper, no accusation, no defensiveness, but just enough to make me stop. I chuckled, trying to lighten it, half joking, half honest. It's not that I don't trust you. I just want to make sure I'm clear on everything. She turned, looked at me, and held my gaze for a long moment. It wasn't a confrontational stare. It was more like she was waiting to see how far I would go with the doubt I just let slip. I didn't go far. I backed off. I changed the subject. We talked about the upcoming beta launch, about the next conference, and we never returned to that thread. The issue wasn't whether she was hiding something. The issue was that I chose not to pursue the question I had just begun to ask. It wasn't because I couldn't. It was because I was afraid of breaking something fragile. I was afraid that asking would change our relationship, that doubting would distort the love, that inspecting too closely might reveal what I wasn't ready to see. So I stayed silent. No one silenced me. I did it to myself. I chose comfort. I chose to preserve the beautiful image. I chose to let love remain untouched in my eyes, even as the cracks began to show beneath. I don't know when asking questions became taboo in what was supposed to be a trusting relationship. I used to think that love meant no control. Now I understand love without questions becomes a dangerous form of self-censorship. I remembered a mirror from my mother's old house. There was a small crack in the corner. I once suggested having it fixed, but she stopped me. Leave it, son. If you look closely, you'll see it. But from afar, you still see your whole self. I laughed back then. But now I get it. Some cracks we're fully aware of. But because we want things to look intact, we choose to step back. We choose to view through the blur. We choose to keep the illusion whole, rather than face the truth broken. And sometimes, that very silence becomes the deepest betrayal. not of someone else, but of your own intuition. What feels noble may be the sweetest trap. No one stopped me from asking. There were no locked doors, no threats, no obvious schemes. Just small moments where I quietly stepped back from seeking clarity, believing I was doing the right thing. I began to avoid topics with the words ownership in them. When the finance team sent shareholder breakdowns, I skimmed them and closed the file. When Frank, an old friend who'd helped me in the early days, asked, "You're still the majority holder, right?" I just smiled. We're partners. Doesn't matter who holds what. I didn't want anyone thinking I was clinging to control. I didn't want Sophia to feel I didn't trust her. I didn't want to turn a trusting relationship into a negotiation. So I stayed silent. I looked the other way. I allowed the ambiguity to continue, as long as everything still looked harmonious. I told myself that love means trust. That silence is a form of respect. That asking too many questions would ruin the beauty we had built. One late afternoon, while waiting for Sophia in a small meeting room, I glanced through the glass wall. She was speaking with her lawyer, confident posture, sharper eyes than usual. Something about the scene felt unfamiliar. A small part of me wanted to walk out and ask what they were discussing. But I held back. I told myself, it's probably something to do with the accounting. She's smart. I don't need to interfere in everything. I convinced myself with reasons that sounded mature, even noble, that every relationship needs boundaries, that people deserve their own space. That real trust means letting go. What I didn't realize was that those noble-sounding reasons were my way of avoiding the truth I didn't want to face. And that's how I stepped into the sweetest kind of trap. One wrapped in the language of love, growth, and generosity. But really, it kept me living in a soft blur, warm enough not to leave, vague enough not to see clearly. An older mentor once told me, the price of being a good man is sometimes pretending not to see what you already saw. Back then, I thought he was bitter. Now I know maybe he was just honest. Honest enough to admit that it's not ignorance that blinds us. It's understanding, guided by emotion, that becomes dangerous. Because when you're smart enough to create convincing logic, and you love enough to use that logic to not question someone, that's when you're most likely to be fooled not by them, but by yourself. I wasn't manipulated by power. I was disarmed by the belief that I was doing something kind. Power disappears the moment questions stop. I used to think that losing power was a dramatic event, that it came with betrayal, upheaval, or at least a formal notice of removal. But in my case, it didn't happen like that. It came in quiet ways. I got used to Sophia attending small meetings on my behalf, then bigger ones. I was busy, she offered. She'd fill me in afterward. I trusted she would say the right things. Then she began signing internal forms. You're deep in the financial planning. Let me handle these. I agreed. First, it was small documents. Then, minor contracts with satellite partners. I still received the scanned copies, but I stopped reading them closely. I saw her signature and felt relieved. No one asked me to give up the legal representation role. No one stole the CEO chair. But one day, I realized I had let someone else sit in it. Because I was tired. Because I trusted. Because I believed it would be more efficient. Power doesn't vanish with noise. It erodes. Quietly. like the ground beneath your feet, slowly worn away by waves while you still believe you're standing strong. I still entered the office as the founder. Staff still greeted me with respect. But there were meetings I was no longer invited to, documents I didn't approve, transactions that no longer needed my sign-off. I didn't resist. In fact, I welcomed the relief. Sophia handled it well. I had more time to focus on the bigger picture. And that belief that I was doing the bigger work, that's what made me blind. Because sometimes we lose the wheel not because someone grabs it, but because we were too busy staring at the horizon. You can't hold power long if you stop asking what's happening behind you. I used to question everything. One strange line of code, I would pursue it. An unusual expense, I'd call accounting. A shift in capital flow, I'd go page by page through the reports. But now, I only asked about vision. I let others handle the rest. I thought that was trust, that it was leadership, that it was the right way to grow. I was wrong. Not asking isn't trust. It's withdrawal. It's surrendering the wheel while the ship still bears your name. Real power isn't taken. It disappears when you stop claiming it. Truth doesn't die. It's just ignored beautifully. She didn't lie to me. Not a single sentence was false. No secret letters, no hidden emails, no passwords she kept from me. Everything was still stored in our shared system. I still had full access. I just stopped logging in. Not because I was busy, but because I no longer wanted to check. I was afraid I'd see something that would shatter the beautiful image I had grown attached to. An image no one forced on me. I chose to believe in it. During the final phase of the Echo project, Sophia handled nearly all the backstage work. She met with partners, worked with lawyers, attended advisor meetings. I was still the public face, still the one on stage. But behind the curtain, I was no longer directing the light. Once I casually asked, should we revisit the voting rights allocation? Sophia looked up from her laptop, slightly surprised. There's no need. We already agreed on that, remember? I nodded, told myself that was enough of a question. I didn't press further, even though something inside me felt unsettled. I wasn't deceived. I was self-soothing. I chose the more pleasant version of reality. There were many things I didn't fully understand in that phase, but I didn't ask. I called it respecting space, delegating, unconditional trust. I didn't want to bother her, didn't want to disrupt what seemed like harmony, didn't want to be the one who broke the illusion. And so I helped preserve a layer of ice, even as it cracked beneath us. I remember walking alone after a gala one night, stopping along a coastal road where soft yellow light touched the dark water. Windy, quiet, and in that moment, I felt something strange. It was as if I had been living inside a shell polished too perfectly. Everyone admired the shell as if it were the whole truth. But deep down, I knew there was another truth, and I had been avoiding it. No one forced me to ignore it. I turned away on my own. No one stopped me from asking. I chose to remain silent. No one stripped my control. I let it slip, piece by piece, with each quiet nod. Truth doesn't die. It simply gets buried beneath silence. And that silence, I was the first one to build it. Love turns to dependency when fear creeps in. I still loved Sophia. Even with unease in my chest, I loved her. Even with nameless fog between us, I still called it love. But what I didn't realize was that love had ceased to be freedom. It became a form of leaning, a soft dependency, a trust wrapped in fear. I was afraid that asking questions would hurt her, afraid that demanding clarity would make her feel distrusted, afraid that if I acted too much like a founder, I would lose my place as a man in her heart. So I stepped back from leadership to remain in the arms of the woman I didn't want to lose. And what I called love slowly became a compromise. No one forced it. I gave it willingly. Every time she leaned her head on my shoulder, I felt like I carried something larger than my career. But that very feeling made me accept things I never would have before. I spoke less, listened more, not because I had learned peace, but because I was afraid one wrong word would crack what we had. She once said quietly, "I know it's hard for someone like you to open up. Thank you for letting me stay." It wasn't a warning. It was a gentle squeeze on my heart. And I squeezed her hand in return, a silent promise, "I won't let you down." But the cost of that promise was a slow retreat into blindness, a place where logic gave way to emotion. Real love doesn't require self-reassurance. If you have to constantly convince yourself to stay, you're no longer free. I found myself avoiding everything, avoiding truth, avoiding questions, avoiding the fear that she might walk away if I dared to lay anything on the table. I no longer checked cash flows, no longer tracked market data, no longer joined risk analysis meetings. I gave her everything, and in return, what did I get? A sense of safety in soft arms, the feeling of being loved, as long as I didn't disturb anything. I thought it was love. But when love no longer allows you to be yourself, no matter how beautiful it looks, it's no longer love. It becomes a shell, a place to hide, a way to preserve a sense of meaning when everything else begins to fall away. I loved her, but I also slipped into something dangerous, using love as an excuse for surrender. I didn't want to lose Sophia. So instead, I began losing myself. Every handhold may hide a condition. The day Sophia handed me a stack of internal equity adjustment documents, she didn't say much. She simply placed her hand over mine, smiled gently, and said, "We're one, aren't we?" I nodded, asking nothing more. I had always believed that when two people trust each other enough, everything can be shared. That when love is deep enough, conditions no longer matter. I was wrong, not because Sophia tricked me, but because I didn't read the fine print. Not just on the paper, but in her eyes, in her control, in the way she always appeared just when I needed to feel needed. I signed, and in that moment, something inside me went quiet. Not because I discovered something wrong, but because I realized I no longer wanted to look. A love with no distance, no principles, no boundaries might sound ideal. But in reality, it becomes the perfect breeding ground for unspoken terms to grow unnoticed. We stopped arguing, stopped revisiting boundaries, stopped clarifying roles or responsibilities. Everything seemed to be understood, and that silent understanding was what blinded me. I could no longer tell the difference between what I chose and what I was led to, between what I truly wanted and what I did just to preserve the relationship. Gentleness in love can be an embrace, but if held too long without facing the truth, It becomes a curtain hiding everything that needs to be seen. One night, I woke in the middle of the night, not from a nightmare, but from something more real. I was living with a woman I loved, and yet I no longer knew for sure what was happening around me. I sat up, thinking I'd step outside. Sophia was still asleep, her hand resting on my shoulder, as if gently keeping me from leaving. I lay back down, not wanting to wake her, not wanting to awaken something deeper, something I was starting to suspect but didn't yet have the strength to face. I told myself, every love has conditions. As long as you choose those conditions with awareness, not out of fear. But the truth was, I was no longer choosing with awareness. I was being carried by those soft handholds, forgetting that sometimes those very hands whisper, if you let go, everything falls. And because I didn't want it to fall, I held on at all costs, even if that cost was silence. Her betrayal came second. His silence came first. Someone once asked me, when did Sophia betray you? I didn't know how to answer. There was no specific day, no exact moment, no clear event I could point to and say, that's when it all fell apart. Maybe it was when she asked me to sign a document I didn't read carefully. Maybe when I let her handle all the auxiliary source code. Maybe that morning I asked, should I take another look at the financials? And she softly replied, no need. Or maybe it was months before, when I started trusting the comfort more than I trusted my own quiet intuition. If I have to answer truthfully, I'd say Sophia wasn't the first to betray me. I betrayed my intuition first. I knew, not fully, but faintly, the kind of knowing that makes your heart sink a little every time someone says the word transparency. I just chose not to name it. I remember our last morning together before everything collapsed. We were having breakfast in the small kitchen of the penthouse. She wore a white shirt, her hair tied up, calmly reviewing the next strategic plan. I poured tea, handed her a cup. She accepted it, smiled, placed her hand on mine. Just like always. Everything looked peaceful, still tender, still like nothing was wrong. But my heart didn't stir the way it used to. It was still, not sad, not angry, just still. It felt like standing across from someone you've known forever, and suddenly, you don't see yourself in their eyes anymore. Sophia didn't betray me. I gave up my clarity, my questions, the things I should have held on to. I blinded myself with love. I traded truth for the illusion of safety. In the end, she didn't need to hide anything. I'd grown used to not asking, used to trusting, used to nodding. And that made it easy for her to walk away without looking back. If love is a bridge, then I was the one who first removed the stones beneath my own side. So by the time she pulled her final step away, all that remained was a gap and the silence I had built myself.
My father once said, Sophia wasn't the first to betray him. It was he who betrayed his own intuition, because he couldn't bear to lose the most beautiful illusion of his life. Sometimes, we are the antagonist in our own story. We choose to believe in order to avoid pain. We choose silence to keep a false peace. But from those wounds, we learn the real lesson. To be free, we must first have the courage to face the truth. To live fully, we must be brave enough to let go of illusions. Hello everyone, I'm Lily, the youngest daughter of Victor Dominic. My father shared these stories, not to be remembered, but to remind us. Everyone deserves a new beginning, even the broken ones. Some names and places have been changed for privacy, but Free Your Soul is real, and it's the most precious legacy he left us. Today, I'm sharing it with you, hoping it reaches someone who needs a quiet, gentle whisper. Thank you for listening with your heart. I'll see you in the next stories.